Hello and welcome. We're back in the kitchen. I'm going to do a short demonstration today, and you can see the scene here. It was taken last summer on Wicklow Head, close enough to where we're living. I'm going to do it on a small scale. I got my colours laid out, and I'll show you those first. My cool colours: indigo, ultramarine, cerulean, two greens, viridian and sap. I've included magenta, which will be in the purple heather, burnt sienna, and cadmium yellow light. And what I'm going to do to start is simply draw in the big shapes. It looks complicated enough from here, but I'm going to show you how to take a scene like this and reduce it to just a few smaller shapes. So I'm dipping my brush in my thinner sand odor. I'm just going to pull out some ultramarine blue, I think a little bit of green, and fill in just the main shapes. So I always start with the horizon, get that in place first. It's about here. And next you got one big shape coming in from here. So you come down to about here, comes across, comes down. And then without going into all of this, I'm following that, the shoreline, bringing it back. It curves straight down, see this triangle here of sand. So that is that there. Then I've got the foreground coming in from here, beyond that, to a little bit before the middle of the canvas. The middle of the picture, that's a little bit more over this side, and then this coming in, and you can judge here just below the halfway point. So I find that about here and bring this in, and it goes all the way down. So I've reduced this scene right now to sky, sea, cliff, beach, and foreground. And I'll also put in, I missed it, the land in the background there, at Wicklow Head. Okay, so once I've done this, I can then divide it further. So I'm looking now, say, at the shape of the grass, which is separate from the shape on the cliff. So I'm reaching straight into my green. I'm seeing it coming down here. Reaches back up, comes down, see this V? And back up again. Reaches up further here. So I'm just taking my green paint and feeling my way with it up here. Does that, comes down a bit and back up. So all of this will be, in fact, that green grass shape. While I've got the green, I'll also do this foreground here, and I'm just wetting my brush enough so it'll flow off. And this is pretty much all going to be a green area. There will be some purple heather there. I'll leave some space for that. And coming in from here. Okay, then the sky is a basic blue, and again all I'm doing right now is staining the canvas. The sea is a grey, getting greener in here, so I'm going to pull in a little bit of indigo in there, but put it on very light, just by adding more of my thinner to it. It's turning greener here, so I'll reach into some of that viridian, mix it with that grey. And it's turning greener again there. So I'm just adding that to the mix, just kind of find my way as I go. Then the cliffs are really a grey shape. There is these highlights, which is quite very light, and there's these darker shadows, but a middle colour again is really just a grey. And that will be divided into the light and dark areas a little bit later. I'm going to make this a little bit lighter there. And then the beach is brown. I'm just going to reach straight into my burnt sienna here, in this sort of triangle. And some of that colour, just adding a colour note while I'm at it, is up here in the foreground. And I will add just a note of the heather. I'm using magenta as a kind of just basic colour. There's going to be some here too. So there's the block in, and all this is doing is reducing all the detail and the content here into its most basic form and shape. And I'm actually going to dry this a little bit, just so that the next layer can go on nicely. I'm still keeping the drawing there so I can see where I am. And I'm going to pull out now the whitest part, really find those. See this triangle here coming down? See this line here? See this edge of the cliff coming down there? The edge of the sea. And another rock edge is coming in from there. So that's like my block-in staining of the canvas going in there now. So what I do next then is go back with a thicker layer of paint that will cover this. I'm going to start at the top. The sky on the horizon is a paler blue. Get that in. It's a bit darker blue overhead with white clouds, so I'm coming in with my ultramarine, mixing it with some of that cerulean. And while that's wet, I'm just going to reach straight into the white here and get some of the white clouds. Okay, and I think I'll do the sea next too. So that was that greyish colour. I've got some indigo, got some white, got some blue, some more white. It's kind of a silvery bluish colour. I'll try this here. A bit too blue. I think I'll make it a bit more grey. Have a touch of that just to tone it down a bit. Yeah, more like that. Okay. The background hill again is grey, a bit bluer. I'm going to come in with that. This is aerial perspective. As land recedes in space, it becomes bluer, it becomes mistier. So this one is further back than these. There. And next I'll go to the green up here. So that's pretty much just sap. I'm adding some of this cadmium yellow pale where it's catching the light. I'd add a tiny bit of white to that. Here, there's this flash of light there where the light touches, and here, so it's catching the edge here. And it's a bit bluer green elsewhere, just adding a little bit of blue to that. A bit of grey. And it continues across here. Now I'll add texture, another light and dark, a little bit later. For now, I'm still just at the second stage really of blocking in. And I'm going to go now with the middle. I've got three kinds of light on the cliff face. I've got where the light is hitting, I've got the deeper shadows, and I've got where there's shadow but less intense. See the difference between 1 in the light, 2 in the shadow right beside it, and 3 much darker, more like kind of caves and crevices there. So I'm going to start with the middle one, that kind of grey, and that'll work pretty much with the same kind of grey that I've already got in the sea here. So all of this, for example, is in shadow. There's no light like there is here. So this whole, it needs to be darker. I'm adding some more. A little bit of brown, a little bit of indigo here. I'm just looking at this shape here. I'm going to make it a bit darker again. And it eats back here, making this V then come down where the grass is in light. And all of this is in shadow here. And then it meets the light of this one coming down, but I'm going to continue with the grey where I see that. So I'm skipping over to here. There's a strong dark here. And a big dark here. And between the darker and the highlights, there's a middle grey. I'm just going to add a little bit more white to this mix. Like here you get darker, here it's lighter, so I'm coming in a bit lighter again. There. And lighter here. So leaving the lighter parts, and I'll wash my brush and bring that in. I'm actually just going to start with pure white and I'll adjust it then on top of that. I'm adding a bit of blue to it. A bit of tiny bit of burnt sienna. So I'm finding these kind of highlights, which are also describing the fall of the cliff. And now I'm going to go back into the grass. See the shadow of the grass around the edge there. So I'm going to come in with some deeper, add some brown to that blue and to that green. And coming along here. And I'll fill in more details later. I'm just going to keep on building up the whole thing a little bit more. See the dark of the sea here. So that's reflecting the cliff. I've got grey, I've got viridian. I'll come right in here. Take a little bit of paint off the brush so it's not quite so dark. And now it's getting greener. I'm moving out into my greener colour here. Starting to move this out now. And bringing in some white, some green grey. So to do like reflections like this, I'm going to start by putting these down. And then pulling the brush across. And I'm going to transfer to the brown of the sand. Add a tiny bit of yellow to that and some white. A little bit more in here, a little bit browner. Bring it all the way up against the cliff there. And it's in shadow here, so I'm going to bring some of that dark. Like that. And I'm going back to the green. I'm going to go start with straight into some sap green. And this is like grasses, so they're pushing upwards. So my brush marks are also going to be doing that. Soft like that, see, so you get that feathery, grassy look. and reaching in for a little bit more. I'll start with pretty much a flat green and then add the heather and some of the more golden kind of grasses and some of the earth colour in there too. So I'm back here. So it's a very light touch. I don't have much paint on the brush at all, but I'm continuing this feathery look, which is the idea of the grasses pushing up from the ground. And I'm going to add some of that kind of gold, earthy colour. Which is actually connecting this foreground with the beach further back. And with some of the colour up here on the more distant cliff. So there's some colour harmony starting to happen. And some of this also here in the foreground. And I'll bring in, before I move on to the heather, I'll bring in some of the darker greens. And some of these here at the base. And I'm going to get a fresh brush and come in with the heather. So I've got this, I'm going to add a little bit of white to that, a tiny bit of blue just to purple it a little bit. I'm coming in here like that. And just pretty much dabbing that in. Not too much, and I'm trying to make sure that the marks just don't go dab, dab, dab. That I'm feeling this more as one clump of heather there. Some in the foreground, letting this overlap some of the greens and appear in it a little bit. And some of that up here too, for like continuity. And I'll bring in a little bit of that white foam on the edge of the sea there. Just pushing that in. And pulling it out. So I put it down, wiping my brush and pulling it out so that there isn't a hard edge. And a bit more green here, that's quite prominent there, reflecting in the water. And I just want to bring out the light there, where the light is hitting that ridge of grass. Here and here. And some more darker notes. So now I'm going back in pretty much to just pure indigo, a little bit of brown. I want to get some of the darker notes here within the cliff face. If you can hear my dog, I'm being told that it's about time for our walk or dinner. So I'll finish up very shortly and come back tomorrow. Okay, so what you've got is pretty much a very quick oil sketch, something like you might hope to do outdoors if the conditions were right. I'll develop some of this in due course, but for now it's just a very simple block in, fill in without too much fuss. But really I want to show you taking what might be a complex scene and reducing it to its most simple shapes and just going in there and getting that in. Have a good evening, and I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks, bye.